that we're coming into this meeting with, but just wanted to be really clear about every question on your list is essentially something that doesn't fall under our purview. So let me cover what does fall under our purview and figure out what kind of questions then shake out afterwards, if that sounds okay. So just general overview. Just as the Department of Corrections monitors facilities for the state rule 2960, my division and department is responsible for monitoring juvenile facilities for the federal Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. So we have acted traditionally as a right and left hand to one another. So Rule 2960, which is the state licensing rule around how youth can be held, and then we are the federal rule around how set of rules around how youth can be held. So just wanted to provide that really fast sentence at the very top. Here's the agenda I put together. I would really love to, first of all, provide an introduction for those of you who aren't familiar with the Minnesota Juvenile Justice Advisory Committee, otherwise known as JJAC, which is a somewhat ugly acronym, but for better or for worse, it's easier to say than Juvenile Justice Advisory Committee. I'll also provide an overview of the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act, and that's that federal act that I just touched upon that we hold monitoring authority over. I'll also, and the acronym for Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act is JJDPA. We'll take a further dive into what some of those core JJDPA requirements are, and those are really 4 protections that we look out for when thinking about how youth are held in facilities, how they're held securely, particularly. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act compliance monitoring process. And I will provide a caveat that I get nerdy in a hurry about that. And so I received some advice that I should probably trim back the compliance monitoring section a little bit. I was giving you literally like a spoon-fed step-by-step around like step 1, open the door of the facility. Step 2, get out your clipboard, get out your form, get your pen out. This is how you do a compliance monitoring visit. So I was probably doing a bit too much, as my kids say. So I did trim that piece back a little bit, but just know that like by the time I'm done, we're done. If you like what you've seen and you want more of this action, we can come back and we can dive deeper into what a compliance monitoring visit actually looks like. And Precious would probably take that on because when Precious was hired almost, 2.5 years ago, Precious took over for the role that I held as compliance monitor. So Precious is that person. Three, got it. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, I'm getting old. I'm getting out of touch. So, all right, let's jump in. So I'm going to go pretty fast through these slides, and I would absolutely be happy to just send these slides afterwards. I'm a huge believer in like not reading for you what you can read on your own, but wanted to provide just, again, a quick introduction to who the Juvenile Justice Advisory Committee is. They've been around since the early 80s, and they're a governor-appointed body, 22 members that are appointed from communities throughout the state. And again, JJAC is positioned within the Youth Services Office that I direct at the Minnesota Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And so I have 3 staff people, so Precious, Kiana, and Melissa, who all serve as staff that support JJAC. The goal for JJAC is to, they meet monthly to try to advance juvenile justice reforms in a collaborative way. So I use the word collaborative on purpose because, like, to me, it was a huge, the main incentive to come here today was to figure out how we can like forge a more collaborative relationship with this group. We've known who you are, we've tracked on what you do. You're a group that meets consistently and maintains consistent passion and sense of advocacy for girls in ways that really no other group does on this level. So just wanted to point out that you know, we're a very tiny, small capacity entity that was a one-man band for many years. And now we're expanding and we've got the staff capacity to begin expanding some of those connections and relationships. So don't just please, I'm just mainly saying like, sorry that I haven't forged stronger connections in the past, but really grateful to be here today and hoping that today can be a turning point in terms of how we work together moving forward. JJAC, the work of the Juvenile Justice Advisory Committee is funded by the Department of Justice. There is a body like JJAC in every U.S. state and territory throughout the U.S., and we all abide by the tenets that are written into the JJDPA. And as long as we can maintain Minnesota's compliance with that federal act, then then we remain eligible as a state for delinquency prevention dollars. And it's kind of chump change compared to what I guess, we've got an 80% decrease since 2002 in federal money that's coming into Minnesota. Last year's allocation was around 800,000 to try to address all of the juvenile justice needs throughout the state. So when I say chump change, I really do mean it. But JJAC tries to be very intentional about where those funds go. In the past, they have really been intentional about ensuring that they've always had at least one program out of like 10 annually that we can afford to fund that does focus exclusively on women and girls. And so there was a program, the Children's Healing Resource Center out of the Children's Hospital here in St. Paul was one of those primary programs that for 7 of my 10 years in this role, we've consistently funded to ensure that girls who are trafficked and victims of sexual abuse receive the care that they need. So just wanted to kind of sprinkle in some touch points around the topic that we're all here for today. JJAC's primary responsibilities are, again, that compliance monitoring that I mentioned. JJAC's responsible for authoring a 3-year plan around juvenile justice. So with some just goals, they have to make sure that all of their projects and activities and projects that they fund align with the goals that are in that 3-year plan. And then they're also responsible for issuing juvenile justice recommendations to the governor and legislature. So we've typically produced an outward-facing annual report that's polished. And haven't had the capacity to do that since about 2001, but now have been able to staff up, and we're getting back to having like a report that I'm hoping I can send you soon within the next year, that where you'll have annual data that's analyzed, broken out by race, ethnicity. I have all of that data. So I have all of these things. I just don't have it in a polished outward facing report that is produced by a high paid communications contractor. So I mentioned the report to you because we're statutorily required to produce it. And we have the components of it, but it's kind of like scrap metal in a bunch of Word documents that's just forged, and it's sitting with the state resource library. And so if you want the legislative library, sorry. And so if you ever want that report and the data that's included, I can provide it for you. I'm just mildly embarrassed because it doesn't look the way that it has in years past. So I'm really proud of the work that goes into producing the report, and especially collecting that statewide juvenile justice data along 5 juvenile justice decision points. Data is again disaggregated by race, ethnicity, gender. So we can talk more about that later. I'm rabbit holing right now. So now I wanted to just provide a really fast introduction to who JJAC is, and to just say this right off the top, that you have a seat, any and all of you have a seat at the JJAC table anytime you're interested in attending a JJAC meeting. JJAC meets monthly at locations around the state, and then we alternate in-person, virtual, in-person, virtual. So I'll make sure that you have the link to the meeting calendar, which is actually on DCYF's website. So this is our chair, Trey Pollard. He's an absolutely incredible advocate for young people. He runs an agency called We Push for Peace, and he and his team are real life violence interrupters. So he was appointed by the governor 3 years ago to take over as chair, and just has a really authentic vision for what he wants JJAC to be. And he took over for an interim chair who took over for a really long time chair named Richard Gardell, who had, I mentioned his name because he is oftentimes associated with JJAC as being the person who chaired this body for a really long time. So we have a new chair, and with any change in leadership, visions change, directions change. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about, if you're familiar with JJAC in the past, I want to talk to you about who JJAC is now. So the face of the franchise is Trey Pollard. And then here are just I'm not going to go through everybody's background, but just wanted to just demonstrate for you the variety of perspectives at the JJAC table. So that federal act that I mentioned dictates the membership components that we have to make sure that we have on our bodies. So all of these state advisory groups throughout the country have to ensure that we have representatives from law enforcement, that we have justice-involved young people, that we have education, out-of-school time providers, therapy providers, courts, probation, people who have experience and are licensed to treat young people who have been victims of sexual assault and sexual violence. And so here's kind of slide 1. And then here's slide 2. Fun fact, we've got Phil Drobnik, who's the head coach of the U.S. Olympic curling team on JJAC. So if you are tuning into the Winter Olympics right now and you look in the background, you will likely see Phil. So I've seen Phil a few different times over the last week, but Phil is, and you might be thinking, what the heck is the U.S. Olympic curling coach doing on a juvenile justice board? He was a longtime probation officer and runs out of school time programming now for young people. And then like on the side moonlights as the U.S. Olympic curling coach. So really excited to have Phil at the table, but we're really excited for everybody who's part of JJAC. So if ever we are subject to open meeting rules. So you are welcome again, like I can't say it enough. You're welcome at the table so that you can pull together with JJAC and get to know who these folks are. JJAC meets monthly, but then a lot of the magic happens on the subcommittee level for JJAC. And so there are 6 subcommittees that are part of JJAC. And then the staff, as part of the Youth Services Office, so Precious, Kiana, and Melissa then, they all provide staff support individually to each of these subcommittees to make sure that they have what they need to pursue their goals. So these 6 subcommittees meet, like I said, almost monthly. And many of them have ongoing projects that take up a lot of their time. So for example, the Ethnic and Racial Disparities Subcommittee, they have an active $130,000 investment project with the Robert F. Kennedy Center for Juvenile Justice Reform, where they're working with Monoman County and Beltrami County to fine-tooth comb their policies and practices that they have in place that are driving disparities for youth, specifically tribal youth, and then rewrite those policies using best practices and examples from other states so that we can begin to see improvement in terms of disparities that are present in those jurisdictions. Mental Health Subcommittee has just launched a huge continuum of care project where they issued 3 awards to one to Ramsey County, one to an agency in Brainerd, and one to Red Lake Nation, that are going to use $200,000 and be able to spend it down within the next 6 months, which is super fast. Like, here's a huge chunk of money, now spend. And what they're gonna do is each of those 3 sites are going to implement or to develop or stand up a juvenile justice mental health continuum of care model that can be used by schools, law enforcement, health care providers, a tool that they can take out and help a young person, help identify or route a young person to the right level of mental health care that they need exactly when they need it, instead of relying upon the system to retroactively give them a level of care that is, God forbid, located within a juvenile facility once it's already too late and that young person has suffered longer than they've needed to. So that's a little bit about that project, and I could go on, but I'm promised I'd be fast. Finally, JJAC 3-year plan, really fast. There are 3 main bucket areas: disparities, reducing harm, and youth and community engagement. So JJAC spent a year worth of retreats coming up with this plan. The plan is 7 pages long. This is just a very distilled down version of their primary kind of goal areas. Now, a little bit about the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. So we just handled items 1 and 2 on the agenda, just to give you some framing. My kids always say Mom, you make me so tired. So I just and I get that. So it's like drinking out of a fire hydrant, and I get that. So I'm trying to give you a checkpoint in terms of where we're at. So we've done bullet points 1 and 2. So now I just wanted to jump into the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. So this is that federal act that tries to ensure that young people are protected if they have contact with the juvenile justice system. This federal act calls for a few things, and I'm going to go fast through this because a lot of this I've already touched on already, but this act says that every state and U.S. territory has to have a few things. They have to have a state advisory group, which is in Minnesota. That advisory group is called JJAC. In other states, it might be the Arizona Council for Juvenile Justice, the Idaho Juvenile Justice Commission. In Minnesota, in the 80s, the folks who stood up this body decided to name us the Juvenile Justice Advisory Committee. So that is us. And then the act also calls for each state to have a staff that supports that body. And minimally, the act has to have one of me, which is a juvenile justice specialist, a person who serves as primary to that body. And so over the years, in my 10 years doing this work, JJAC has slowly picked up momentum in terms of projects that they want to take on. And I was able to secure federal and a little bit of state funding to hire 3 people to help move me from being a one-man band holding multiple titles to being a true team approach to the work. And so I share that because We're in a different place now than the last time I was attending these meetings, like 7 years ago. I was here being like one-man band, doing like playing all the instruments. And now we're in a much more stable place. And one of my big like goals for today is really to like help you get to know Precious a little, or at least I'm doing most of the talking. So I want to at least put just a plug in for like, Precious is the person that I'm hoping you'll continue to invite back so that she can be at the table and remain plugged into this group. Her job is, she's really a double agent. She's half-time compliance monitor, but then she's also grant manager. So she's got a really full plate. So like when we're doling out funds to programs, she's managing all of those contracts and grants, but then she's also, like I said, a grant compliance monitor. So there are a few different, like, both roles I think are applicable for Precious at this table, if I might just make my pitch, and I know I'm coming on strong, but like, it would be great for Precious to not only keep you abreast of and to learn from you and to provide you with information about the compliance work that she's doing, but then also the grantees that we're supporting. So, she sits alongside a few other positions that are part of our office, an ethnic and racial disparities coordinator, and that's Kiana. And then a health and resiliency coordinator, who I made a typo, and so it's not grant manager, it's health and resiliency coordinator, and that's Melissa. And so her job is to look at the intersection of mental health and juvenile justice and figure out how we can lift up projects and bring money into the state that will help bolster the right level of mental health support for youth when they need it most. So, and Melissa was poached from the Department of Health, and she was a longtime suicide prevention coordinator there for youth. And she is just like incredible and has done some great work for mental health with girls. So Melissa is also a person who down the road, if we feel like a connection could be made and it would be appropriate, would love to invite Melissa, or would love to find out if you'd be willing to invite Melissa to the table. Okay, finally, getting through this boring slide. The act then says that as long as we do our work as a state advisory group, we keep Minnesota in compliance with this federal act, then we receive federal money. And then the federal government, Department of Justice, provides training. So if ever we need it as a state, and there have been a few examples of where I've like wrangled federal free training to bring in and to help offer training here in Minnesota. A couple good examples are Minneapolis Police Department. Just after the murder of George Floyd, I was able to secure free training where some federal folks were flown in to just spend 2 days with the Minneapolis Police Department, and it was literally the full force. Like, and every officer who has any contact with public. So the administrative positions were the only positions that were excluded from this training. And it was 2 days worth of just understanding more about young people, like brain development, understanding more about like alternatives to charge, understanding more about what kind of community resources are available. So folks like the Legal Rights Center came in, the Link, folks who run shelters came in and said like, hey, if you haven't like remembered or you haven't heard from us in a while, we really want you to know that we're here for you. And like, you can send young people here anytime. And here's like, we are an option for you. So anyway, just like, that's an example of some of that federal training. Now, federal training resources are a little bit more limited as of late, but wanted to mention that like we can submit, we have the ability to submit a training request like that at any time throughout the year, and we can at least try. Like my mom always says, you don't get if you don't ask. So if this group ever, I extend that to you as well, to say like, if there's an example of something that you've really been interested in, Precious can give you more information, because that federal training cohort, what's cool is that they're not people coming from DC, they're people coming from other states. Like we've got trainers from Minnesota too, who like are paid to come in by the feds, and it's free. So I mentioned that only because we're all in this together in the juvenile justice field, where it's like we're scraping pennies. So anytime we can say free, I'd like to try to extend that as far as we can. Okay, so diving into that federal act, the core requirements, here they are. This is the part that gets especially fun. Okay, so let's get nerdy. The federal act really stands on these 4 core pillars, 4 core requirements that protect young people: deinstitutionalization of status offenders, jail removal, sight and sound separation, and racial and ethnic disparities. If any of you have been connected to the work of JJAC for any lengthy amount of time, this racial and ethnic disparities, the fourth requirement, had been historically named in this federal act as disproportionate minority contact, DMC. Hideous term, happy that that the feds made that change. The new change is racial and ethnic disparity. So just wanted to point that out for anybody who, I know some of you have had touch points with some of the federal work. So jumping into each one. So DSO, deinstitutionalization of status offenders, is essentially a protection in place to ensure that young people that we're limiting trauma and harm to young people when at all possible. And so the main thing that we need to ensure is that young people who are accused of status offenses, as opposed to a delinquent offense, are not held securely or receive secure treatment at any point in time. So that includes cuffing rails, cuffing rings, cuffing bench. And certainly secure confinement in a cell. And so there are some exceptions to the rule, like the valid court order, but I don't want to take up too much time. We could go into that and like just say the word, and later on we can have Precious come back and talk more about valid court order. But a status offense is essentially something that like, an adult couldn't be penalized for, but a young person could. Skipping school, running away, breaking curfew, possession or use of alcohol. Some of those things where like in the if you rewind 20 years, it was the, the scared straight type thing where it's like, oh, you think it's real cute to continue to run away. We're going to lock you up in a cell for like 6 hours, 7 hours and just freak you out and make it so that no, like we understand the harm that is caused by that. So that's what this act or this tenet of the act ensures protection from. And then next, adult jail and lockup removal. Ensuring that that we're minimizing the amount of time that a young person is held within a facility that is built primarily for adults. So that includes adult jails, also law enforcement agencies, police departments. Most facilities in Minnesota have to adhere to the 6-hour maximum. There are some exceptions, however, for jurisdictions that fall in rural locations. And so we help monitor that. The next is sight and sound separation. So when youth and adults are held in a facility, and this one applies especially to if you think about police departments who have, some are 5, 6 cells, ensuring that that facility and their staff are doing everything that they can, that they have policies and procedures in place to prevent sustained sight and sound contact between adults and youth who are being held at the same time. Of course, the goal being to minimize trauma. And I know I'm going really fast. And then finally, racial and ethnic disparities. So Kiana's position who's not here today, but Kiana's position exists for this protection solely. And her job is to get to know community-based agencies and programs that are doing disparities prevention and intervention work, assess the efficacy of those programs, and report on those programs, and then to try to figure out how we can, as a state, convince the federal government to provide additional funding to support those community-based interventions. So there is a position like Kiana's in most every other state in the nation. There's a position just like Precious is in most every other state in the nation. Okay, and then the monitoring process. What is it? So this is the final bullet. We're almost done, but this is the final bullet that I had on the agenda. So what does it really look like to monitor for this federal act? And I think you've probably heard from the Inspection, Enforcement, and Licensing unit in the past about perhaps what their compliance monitoring procedures look like, or what a compliance monitoring visit looks like for them. If not, I mean, I find that, so for me, just a little bit of like fun, like it's Valentine's week, so I have to share a little bit of like a soft spot in my heart for the Inspections and Enforcement unit, because when I came on 10 years ago, I've got a communications major with a minor in French and a professional background as being a youth worker. So like, I was like, how am I going to show up in facilities and like need to like work with corrections, law enforcement around compliance monitoring? Like, I'm a Care Bear, how's this going to work? And so thankfully, folks from INE, so it was Tim Thompson, Lisa Becking, Julie Snyder, and others who took me under their wing and really like taught me on a state level, here's how we implement our compliance monitoring processes. And then taught me like a lot about just managing those relationships and understanding how to build relationships that are built on like support with facilities, as opposed to like more punitive type, gotcha game. Instead, it was like, here's how we support facilities in being successful, because that's ultimately the goal. So anyway, wanted to just share a little bit about excuse me, bless, and about compliance. So like I've talked about, DOC has its set of compliance monitors that monitor for 2960. This federal act calls for each state to have a federal compliance monitor for this act. And so in Minnesota, that person is Precious. The act says that that person's got a few responsibilities. They have to oversee a compliance monitoring plan. They have to report on violations. They have to visit facilities in person to make sure that they are appropriately classified. So that especially applies to law enforcement agencies like police departments who sometimes their budgets will fall short and they'll say, yep, we can no longer securely hold. We don't use our cells anymore. We now have an arrangement with the sheriff's department. So that kind of stuff Precious needs to know. She needs to stay in communication with those facilities. She does that through on-site visits and surveys. We provide technical assistance and education. And then she's constantly and that compliance monitoring universe is an actual federal term, which sounds like like Guardians of the Galaxy, but it is an actual term. Precious is maintaining that list of 581 facilities in Minnesota and their classification levels to make sure that we're always up to speed on who is subject, which facilities are subject to visit. So most of these same monitoring responsibilities are held by your I&E unit as well, but just for their facility, like for framed the way that they need to frame it. So a compliance monitor is a compliance monitor. I just wanted to explain specifically the expectations of the federal compliance monitor, Precious. 581 facilities. Many years ago, some genius at the Department of Public Safety, where I was at, partnered up with some kind-hearted, also genius at the Department of Corrections to come up with an interagency agreement, memorandum of agreement that really helps us fulfill our monitoring expectations and requirements. So when we look at the 581 facilities that are on the compliance monitoring universe, many are law enforcement, but then we've got this entire chunk that are all of the DOC licensed facilities where your inspections, enforcement, and licensing unit is there anyway, doing their on-site inspections. So this MOA asks for the inspectors to be kind enough and good enough to tack on the federal inspection responsibilities to the end of their 2960 inspection. So our responsibility, like in exchange, the original agreement was then that Department of Public Safety had funded a fire marshal position then so there was a tit for tat, there was like an exchange. And at this point, we're in the agreement, we'll have to revisit it now that we're at Department of Children, Youth and Families, but it's an agreement between Youth Services Office and Christy Strang and the inspections and the licensing part's new. So IEL unit. I was so used to I&E. So IEL unit. And part of our responsibility is to make sure that that we're doing right by that agreement, and that my team is providing the DOC's team with all of the renewed and refreshed training that they need in order to check for those 4 tenets. And so for the most part, those 4 requirements don't add a substantial amount of time. It's for them, since we're talking about adult jails, we're talking about juvenile facilities, certainly. So for adult jails, for example, the 6-hour hold limit is one of the main ones that they're checking for us. And most violations are self-reported by facilities through S3, which I understand is now changing from S3 to something else, unless I'm wrong.
I think it's still S3.
Okay, S3. Okay. So many are self-reported, but then other times, a lot of this is relationship oriented. So sometimes facilities will end up just admitting it or not admit it, but it'll become revealed in an on-site visit to IE inspection enforcement, IEL. One way or another, we have a few different mechanisms to find out what the violations are by facilities in Minnesota. This is how the inspections load is divvied up. So Precious is, DOC, so jumping straight over to the right side of this slide, DOC is responsible for, via this MOA, has taken on the work of monitoring for the JJDPA at facilities that are DOC licensed. And then the balance of that list then on the left is everything then that Precious is left with. So police departments, co-located facilities, we have 3 in Minnesota, Washington County, Carver County, co-located facility, and then Red Wing. And then court holding facilities. So Precious is providing inspection and enforcement at all of the facilities that aren't DOC licensed. And I understand that may spark some questions too, which I'm more than happy to circle back on. What's entailed then? What are the components of the compliance monitoring process? It's all about collecting data. It's all about understanding where violations have happened. It's all about then responding to those violations with technical assistance. So when a violation happens, when a facility says, shoot, we know that we were supposed to have processed this young person in and out of here within 6 hours. But we didn't, we held this person for 8 hours. It's Precious's role then to follow up and like sit down and to just talk about, like, I've seen 2 of these now, like in your records that I've reviewed, like what's happening, what can we put in place? How can we adjust a policy to ensure that you're not going to continue to violate this federal act? And so same thing, the DOC inspectors, when they're monitoring and talking with their facilities, they've received that same set of like marching orders or instructions where like they're supposed to, they respond the same exact way Precious would at her law enforcement agencies. They're doing the same thing. Hi, so I see that you have that at this adult jail, you didn't process this young person in and out within 48 hours, which is what you're licensed for with the rural removal exception. What's the deal? Well, we have a major road construction project down here in Houston County, and we are not going to be able to transport kids. We've got 2 staff people, and how do we figure this out? So like that's like a specific, like I was able to go down that road because that is a specific example 3 years ago that I helped navigate with inspections and enforcement around, it was Houston County Jail, literally, and they needed just some support because they did have a construction project that was preventing them from being able to maintain compliance with the removal exception or with the removal rule. So I was able to write to the federal government, explain the extenuating circumstances, and then I was able to be able to extend that facility's hold time. So those are some examples of like the way that we provide technical assistance. We don't go and we say violation, done deal, like bad, red mark. Like it's instead like, okay, here's some violations, but let's talk a little bit about why, and let's figure out if we can find a fix. And so I am well aware, I know that the inspection, enforcement, and licensing unit is under a ton of pressure and strain in a lot of ways, and that's not new. And so historically, one of the things that I think has worked really well is figuring out how me before, but then now my team can help fill in some of like the creative or the relationship building pieces that perhaps IEL isn't like inclined or not inclined, that's a negative word, but that they're not able to take on. So I have just a ton, I could like bring slide after slide of really cool examples of like programs that have blossomed out of this interagency agreement that we have, where like Lisa Becking, for example, was like, there's like no enrichment programming happening at an unnamed facility. And what can we do? Like I just finished my compliance visit, but I have 7 more compliance inspections that are scheduled this month. So like, can you help? And I was like, heck yeah, thank you. We're kind of like Power Rangers, where it's like, tap us in. Like that is the goal of this relationship, is to figure out how my team, especially now that we have had Precious in this role. And so what we did was we co-wrote a curriculum with the facility and then brought a canine therapy dog that lived at the facility and then had workbooks then that like were funded, and we used JJAC money to help fund those workbooks, and done cultural arts programming up in Bemidji, where we contracted with Anton Truer, a native artist who worked with youth for 6 months and made an art gallery, and youth created like, so that was a project that was, I can go on about projects that have been born out of gaps that inspection enforcement and licensing have seen in the field, and then they like tap us in and be like, cool, you go in with whatever time or creativity or money, and like let's figure out if we can help the facility scratch this itch. And so that's been like one of the, for me, a highlight of being in this role. It is some of the creative projects that we've been able to launch. I have an entire slide deck just on that, like a creative projects, like the fun stuff we've done. Anyway, back to staying on track. Component 3, reporting violations. So we have to, when we collect data from the Department of Corrections on violations that are found. Precious also collects violation data from her on-site inspections. And then I produce a cumulative, like a report to the federal government, Department of Justice, on the number of violations that we found in each of the core requirement areas. Prevention is a huge piece. Preventing violations with education and relationship building is completely the goal. Like helping facilities rewrite policies or find new solutions that will help prevent violations of this federal act. Because as long as we're preventing violations of this act, we're preventing trauma. Like this act exists to reduce and prevent trauma. So if we're reducing violations, that means we're preventing and reducing trauma for young people. And that I know was a speed round and it was a lot to throw at you. And I also know that I just presented to you something that was not completely, that didn't align with the set of questions that you actually posed. And I'm like well aware of that, but I hope that what I did share with you is information that now you can keep in mind and can hopefully help us grow in like the area that we are responsible for. The one other thing, the other caveat that I'll mention that I should have mentioned at the top of this meeting is like if I were to share with you the 581 facility compliance monitoring universe, which we're happy to, it's transparent and we want to share. You will see that there is not a single DHS licensed or therapy-based facility on that list. Why? Because at this point in time, unless ratified or changed, the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act, the JJDPA, applies only to facilities that are corrections in nature. So it begins and ends with those that are corrections in nature. Does that send some shivers up my spine? Yes, because we do know that there are some DHS licensed facilities that are maintaining secure practices. However, it's outside of the monitoring authority of our office to take on inspections for DHS licensed facilities. So the questions that you had were almost exclusively questions for the facilities that are DHS licensed that we don't have touch points with. But wanted to point out that we do have touch points with all of the facilities that are corrections in nature. So that concludes what I wanted to share, except one final word, which is like there's a genuine, absolute, before opening up to questions, like there's an absolute genuine interest in maintaining and building a relationship between this group and the Juvenile Justice Advisory Committee, as well as this group and Precious, our compliance monitor. So if you don't see much of me moving forward, it's because I have other things that our deputy commissioner needs me to do, but Precious is really the primary point person that is on the ground doing this work. And so today, Assistant Commissioner Weeks and I thought it would be appropriate for me to like provide a little bit of this framing and to provide an introduction, like a soft kind of handoff or introduction to Precious, and plant some roots on how we can maintain connections in ways that you find beneficial.
Thank you, Callie. So are we ready to open up for
Yeah.
questions? I
Yeah.
see Paula has, I'll let you read it yourself. A question, I guess, in the mail or comment or in the messaging or the chat.
Yeah, good point, good question. So I can't, it's this, what you're pointing out is needs to be, I would say, directed to, and you've gone in the right direction. It's a 2960 situation and issue. It's outside, what you're talking about is also isolation is outside of our monitoring authority. Our monitoring authority is relegated exclusively to the core protections that I mentioned.
Can I ask a follow-up question about that?
Yeah.
Sometimes the protection, or what we've seen is like the sight sound protections that are designed to minimize trauma actually cause trauma because they cause seg-like situations for
Yeah.
youth
Especially women,
Mhm.
girls.
and women and girls.
Because
Yeah,
yeah,
so
boys.
what about that?
Yeah.
That would, my hope would be that that would be an unintended consequence of you guys monitoring for sight sound violations. But nobody's looking at the seg-like conditions then is what I'm hearing.
And that same exact issue happens with youth who are charged as adults or who are held
Right.
also in situations where they're essentially alone.
Who's responsible for looking at that?
At this point, at this point, we monitor for violations against it and then encourage facilities to introduce programming that enhances it and that enhances conditions for young people.
But that's not, I mean, you don't have
We
any
don't
teeth
have-
to do that.
we don't
That's not
have
part
really
of-
any
okay,
teeth.
So nobody.
No, and so-
Is there somebody who does that? I guess is the question. If not you, then who? Like, who would be in charge of that problem?
That would be, I'm not, I can't speak to, I understand Rule 2960, but I don't understand how far, like what instruction they have around how far their levels of support go. I try to stretch, I try to take what our monitoring authority looks like and try to stretch out as much touch point as we possibly can with a facility, with having only one position, a half-time position to be able to dedicate to it. So what you're bringing up is something that many other states have taken on and have addressed or dealt with
Through state law.
through state law and through resources, through the appropriate level of resourcing, having staff that are being staffed appropriately to be able to provide that level of support. In Minnesota, we're doing the bare minimum. We're doing the bare minimum, which is maintaining compliance with the federal act. So I'm not, I would be speaking out of turn to talk about Rule 2960 because that's not me. But I can say that with the JJDPA, we're doing the bare minimum and I'm trying to garage sale free box our way into creatively stretching our toes as much as we can into additional support. But and with JJAC, that's another, JJAC is a body that can take on that type of work if that's an issue that aligns with their 3-year plan. And if a body comes to them, or if somebody comes to them saying, we've noticed this, we've heard this, can JJAC do something about it? And so that's part of my job, is to bring to JJAC, the Juvenile Justice Advisory Committee, issues that they might want to prioritize in the coming year. And so they just released their platform, which is primarily right now consumed with raising the age of delinquency and the fallout there, and how local jurisdictions are responding to that change, and the major gaps that are existing when we're sending 10, 11, 12-year-olds now into a system that is not built to address youth behavior, but instead is built to address parent behavior. So that's primarily what JJAC is taking on, but that's part of why I think it's really important for us to build this because where I don't have specific staff capacity to take on issues or to take this on, JJAC as a volunteer 22-person member body does have the ability to, it is their business to prioritize, issues, but right now they've got 5 issues on there.
Yeah, that seems like something we could talk about,
Yeah.
connecting with JJAC. Angela and then
could you come
Paula.
present to
Sorry.
JJAC or, yeah, no.
Angela, you had your hand up, and then Paula.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. That was really very helpful. I do have a question. It seems like some of the questions that we did raise, I believe, were before the Department of Public Safety switched in June of 2025. And maybe some of the questions we still have need to be directed to DPS. Is there a way, do you think we could have a meeting between DHS, DPS, and your office? And this is probably just for our group, just so we can close some of these loops and address things together.
Yeah, I think we're complete, I don't want to speak for DPS since I'm not a DPS employee anymore, but we have a very open relationship. Among those of us who maintain monitoring authority and responsibilities, we hold a pretty high level of commitment to trying to be, I can say we try to be really transparent about what we're doing and trying to protect young people as best we can. And so I think all partners would be open to that, and I certainly like can step up and volunteer to help arrange a meeting like that. I would want to know, I can take a look at your questions and try to determine who it, like, I would want to know, like, do you have any adjustments to the questions that you have? Because there's no, now that we left DPS, there's nobody else at DPS that does juvenile compliance unless there's something at BCA that I don't know about, but I mean, of course, there's like the post board certification stuff and like, so, I mean, it's just kind of like who you would want us to tag into.
Yeah, sure. I'm just wondering if there has ever been compliance issues between, you know, federal legislation and state policy. Like if there are ever conflicts in terms of compliance, how does that get resolved? And has there ever been?
Yes, great question. So there is a link to on our webpage, which I should have shared found a way to share the link. In 2011, so it's an oldie but a goodie. We had there's the Statistical Analysis Center at the Office of Justice Programs where we were produced a statute, like a comparison between the federal regulations and state. And so we are, when monitoring, we're required to defer to the most, like the highest level of protection or the most like restrictive of the two. So a good example is like federal rules require a monitoring, what is it, repeat monitoring visits once every for sure year for co-located facilities, but every 3 for detention facilities. Well, in Minnesota, the IEL unit is monitoring every 2. So we actually exceed the federal expectation around monitoring schedule. So it's just like one example of a few that this report lays out, and Dana Swayze is the statistician or researcher who took on that project. So I'll make sure that I follow up with the link to that report. It's really helpful, and it also points out some pretty important gaps that still exist 15 years later.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's very helpful. Yeah, if we can have that, that would be great. Thank you.
And I think Dana presented to this group that report, but that was so long ago. So, and I've received so many like reaches saying like, is your office going to redo that report? Is your office going to redo that report? And it's like, well, that came with a legislative appropriation. So like we have like $800,000 to work with, and that's to like support a staff also. So unfortunately, we haven't renewed it or re-upped that report, refreshed it.
So Crystal, you had a related point?
I did. I think because like this group is getting all of this information from these different areas, and like Liz and Gino are going to talk about like, you know, DOC PREA work after this. Maybe it would be helpful to then have like a step back conversation. Like, what are these big areas where it seems like the questions are coming in? And then how can we look at that as a group of state agencies who are all involved and have different roles and figure out like who should be involved? How can we come together to talk about this? Because I think to Paula's example in the chat, you know, one of the things that we had said is, how can we bring DHS's maltreatment unit in and learn about how they do that work? And then how DOC's inspection and enforcement unit responds to the DHS, like maltreatment findings. Like, I think that would be a valuable conversation to get at this question. So I think how this group can identify what are those big areas that you want to keep like diving more deeply into will help give us a sense of direction over the next several months. I think this will take us a fair amount of time to figure out who the right people are and how to bring people together appropriately.
Paula, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Callie. So I want to go back to what I wrote, and this is connected to what Angela was saying and Corey was saying. Many of us have been very concerned for years that there is no one authority entity in the state of Minnesota that actually does ensure the care and well-being and the safety of kids in our juvenile facilities. And so I guess I misunderstood you earlier in your presentation about how you collaborate with DOC, DHS, et cetera, because this is really concerning. Like, what is the accountability for Northwestern Minnesota Juvenile Center? if it's not you, as Corey said, if not you, who? Somebody in the state has got to take oversight seriously and the accountability, because kids are not safe in our facilities. And there's a whole bunch of different agencies and entities that have some piece of that monitoring, but ultimately no one is ensuring that the system is safe for kids. And I'm really concerned about that. And that goes to what I think Angela was talking about too, is that we need an agency, and I thought it would be DCYF to take that on when I heard that there was a new department. But I have a real concern that each aid, like DHS, DOC, now I'm hearing this from you related to JJAC, your piece of that compliance is only this big when we need a statewide authority to really ensure the safety of kids and hold facilities accountable. So I just wanted to make sure that I came back to that, because it is a longstanding concern and will remain that way.
Yep, and you nailed it, 1,000%, that's what's needed, 100, yeah, in Minnesota. And having this federal connection to other bodies that have, monitoring authority and responsibility, I've seen what it looks like in other states that are built up and resourced the way that you're describing. And that's exactly what is 1,000% what we need, and would absolutely love that. Like, I've seen states where they've got a 30-person team that is not only where they all sit together and it's JDEI in one office next to, and it's saddled up next to the folks who, staff the state advisory committee, and it's saddled up to the folks who do corrections, saddled up next to the people who assist with or support probation. And they've got a county team there where they're all like part of one big juvenile justice united office that's like essentially provides this coordinated level of support to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. And we don't have that in Minnesota. And believe me, like, that is, I've been like inching towards in 10 years, like trying to figure out, like, might we become this, and like, might this office become this? Or in juvenile justice has been, it's the field is political, like it's been political around like, what is shared, what isn't, who speaks for whose territory is what. And so I'm a youth worker. So like, that to me was one of the hardest things about taking on this job, is to like understand how bifurcated it truly is, that like exactly how you described it, where it's like, oh, okay, so our jurisdiction begins and ends here. 2960's jurisdiction is this, but then what about everything else floating in the ether?
Yeah, I mean, it honestly, it kind of feels like every time we try to figure this out, it's like, nope, not our job. Nope, not our job. Nope, not our.
It's nope, not our job, but we agree that like it's fundamentally troubling, disturbing. And so like, could we together do something about it?
I think it's that it's many different people's jobs, right? And that it feels like it's this group or it's this group or it's that group. And to do like, I think what Callie was just saying, and like to Paula's concern, like, would be a massive undertaking that would require a significant amount of change at the state level. So I think it's also just important to be really clear what it would take to do it. But that is, if this group wants to focus on what that would take and looking at some of the different models, I think, that would be a good area of focus for.
Yeah, well, and I think part of getting there needs to be a clear side-by-side understanding of what role each group is actually doing. So maybe after we hear from everyone, we create some sort of a document so we understand. We can, like a Venn diagram or something, so, or an organizational chart that lists out the duties, responsibilities, statutory authority for each agency, like as it is today, and then like,
What are the
where
gaps?
the gaps
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, maybe
and-
even envisioning a way that those efforts can be coordinated across and so there isn't this political, like, don't step on this agency's toes and stuff. I'm sorry, Angela, I see you have your hand up. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. Thank you again. I'm just wondering, you mentioned states that do have sort of more of a cohesive communications model. Are there states that you can give us just examples of that you can recall off the top of your head that have models that are perhaps a little more integrated?
Yes, absolutely. Georgia, Florida, Maryland are three that come to my mind right off the bat. I can also give examples of those that have been, we have been, so once a year, we're required, all state advisory groups, we're required to get together in Washington DC under the Department of Justice, and we have to we receive training around, this act, and to understand, we fall as in Minnesota, we fall in the bottom 10% we have for as long as I've been in this job around how we're resourced to do juvenile justice. And based on our, the feds have said, based on your geography, your population, you need to be, you need to staff up by 5 times where you're at. And so, but it's where's the money come from? So, and in a time where legislature has wanted to pull back instead of invest in, it's a tough ask when it comes from just one agency, but if we can do it together, you can absolutely count me, and I'm sure Assistant Commissioner Weeks in on Venn diagramming. We've done some of that, a little bit of that work. We've also drawn up the skeleton for what it would take to appropriately staff this the right way based on how other states have done it. And then we also have a collection of sample legislation that other states have introduced to really streamline the communication, and then also data collection, having a centralized data hub that calls with common terminology and reporting requirements that requires all 87 counties to report the same information the same way. So the dream is there, the ideas have been there for many years, but are waiting for this group and others for us to I love what you're describing, this summit where we Geneva Convention this thing and Venn diagram and figure out some grand idea to increase what we're doing and enhance what we're doing for young people, make sure nobody falls through the cracks.
Linda's got her hand up.
Hi, thank you. Well, I'm asking whether or not your agency is part of that would have anything to do with juveniles who definitely have some significant mental health issues, but they also have been arrested, so they have to be detained in some way. And I bring this up because I certainly have gotten calls at home. I'm one of the commissioners, and I'm on the I'm with the Association of Minnesota Counties, where we've been called up by emergency rooms saying, hey, we've got a 13-year-old that's been locked up here in the emergency room for 3 weeks, and there's no bed, there's no place to put that juvenile. Also heard of a case where juvenile there's no placement for him, except a long ways away, and I think $2,500 a day because of the significance of the issues. And so a house had to be rented and the staff put in place. So I'm trying to figure out, what agency could be part of this, of figuring out that huge gap of juveniles who have such significant mental health issues and do need to be detained.
I'm so happy you brought this up. So that is one of JJAC's 5 primary priorities that landed on its legislative platform, which we're actually presenting tomorrow at the Capitol to about 20 legislators, partners, a room of 80 that we bring together annually just to talk about its platform. And so Matt Bauer, who's the superintendent of Dakota County Juvenile Services Center, he chairs JJAC's mental health subcommittee. And so Linda, the children's boarding crisis has been an issue that we've been talking about with JJAC for years, and he has been not letting it go and has been showing up. And so I can only speak to what JJAC's working on with it, which is to draft. He's got legislation drafted, not sure how far it's going or has gone, but legislation to help as a stopgap provide support to facilities that are, until a more significant change is made, having to triage some of the major mental health challenges that young people are facing. And so we've talked as JJAC with a variety of facilities, James O'Donnell up in Moorhead, And others saying like, we've got kids who are cutting themselves and writing on the wall with their own blood. And like, we don't have the, so like Linda, you like your stories are, like we understand, like it's really painful to hear the level of agony that young people are going through. And it's also, it adds to it when you know that the facility staff are not equipped to triage that level of mental health response. So what I'll do is I'll follow up and share with you JJAC's platform that we're presenting tomorrow. We're presenting it to legislature in partnership with the Children's Cabinet, who have also prioritized this issue. And so it's going to be co-presented by JJAC and the Children's Cabinet to these members of legislature, just saying like, we need movement on this. We need to make sure that until you can come up with a more long-term solution, facilities need, like we need creative solutions so that young people can get access to the therapy, the level of therapy that they need so that they're not sitting here in anguish if they do end up here. So some movement, it is a priority of JJAC, so that's all I can speak to is not obviously not fixed, but it is like an issue that JJAC is putting a lot of time and energy into, and Matt Bauer is really the main person who's driving that.
Thank you very much. If you can send me something, that would be wonderful. I can respond back with if there's anything that counties can help do to support what you are also saying, we would be more than happy to. It's my understanding, I think, from local juvenile justice professionals that Minnesota is like rock bottom for juvenile mental health beds. I mean, we're at the bottom of the list. We're 50 out of 50.
Mm-hmm. Recently visited a PRTF in where would outside Wellner was, and they had like 6 beds. So I mean, like it's just like we've got a real problem here, and there is no like immediate fix, but there are, it's really important to be like sharing, I think, candid stories about what young people are actually experiencing and to keep it as real as possible with these legislators. And so like when James O'Donnell was willing to share and say like, yep, got a young person who bit a hole in his own wrist and wrote messages on the wall and like refuses to bathe because he doesn't want to be around other young people. Like what do we do for that child that like doesn't like just leave him in isolation? Like we are trying to have some engagement, but like nobody wants to engage with him and he doesn't want to engage with others. Like he needs a deeper level of therapy than what we can provide here. And like he never should have been here in the first place. Like most facility superintendents are saying like these kids should never be here in the first place. Yeah, so we'll have Angie Teese and Emilio Lamba from AMC at our meeting tomorrow. So yes, and any and all of you are welcome to our JJAC meeting tomorrow. It's gonna be a full house. We've got 80 people RSVP'd and we have exactly 80 chairs. I counted them. So if there a few of you would like to attend tomorrow, it's at the Capitol. I'll make sure that I've got that I'll sent forward over the invitation. Again, open meeting law. So want to just, you know, I say that because like, it's not just me saying, oh, it'd be fun if you came. Like you have the right to be at these JJAC meetings. So that's why I kind of continue to put that plug out there. So I'll make sure that you all have the information for tomorrow's meeting. Noon at the Capitol, hearing room 123. Refreshments will be served.
I ask another follow-up
Thank
question.
you.
So going back to my staff are full, my staff that are representing kids every day in court are full of stories of kids getting held on status offenses in the JDC. Sometimes because the judges order it, and sometimes not though. So do you have some sort of like, do we report that to you all? Is that what we're supposed to be doing? Should I be having my staff call you or like submit things to you and they know that there are these things going on and then like walk me through how that would work. If I have a child who is a runaway and they've decided to keep this child in the JDC because parents won't pick her up and she has no other charges, but there's no therapeutic placement for her to go to. And I call you and I say, all right, here we go. Then what happens?
We review, so some states like get live calls like that, but usually it's a matter of us reviewing facility records after the child's already been held on a VCO.
Yeah.
And then we, Precious monitor, like reviews the conditions of that VCO, and she verifies, did that child have a hearing within a certain amount of time? Did that child have access to, so there are tenants that she has to check for in order to validate the valid court order and then decide whether or not it's counted as a violation.
So how do those
through
records
education.
how do you find those records? Oh, do you just audit them all or what?
Mhm.
Oh, so if we were to send you these things in real time, what would happen?
So right now we don't have right now we don't have a system for, I mean, we could, I really want to be able to say, like, yes, we want this in real time so we can immediately like triage what's going on as it's happening. Like that would be a significant change to our process, and it would be a departure from what we have the capacity to do statewide. And it's also departure from what like the feds are expecting of us. And I say this like as a disappointment to my own self, but like I say this not representing my own feelings or wants. I'm saying it representing the reality of like what we're tasked with and what we have the capacity with, what we're staffed for. So well, the interest is there. Like I would say like we could continue to talk about what that might look like and figure out, because if there are continued violations, first of all, VCO has been phased out in most other states. Like we're one of the few states that are still using valid court order. And like we need to get with the times, and like we need to phase it out as a
It's
state.
not valid.
Like, yeah, like it's a complete like violation, and
Yeah,
completely
it's an illegal
contradicts,
order.
it completely contradicts like everything that the JJDPA is about. And so we have a judge on JJAC, Judge Mayer, who's felt that way for a very long time. And so like we talk about it on Capitol Hill with legislators as well, but like they just don't seem to care. It's so outside of like what kind of their level of involvement that they want to have. So like you're speaking to the choir in terms of like an issue that we actually care about. And so like I don't want to say no, because like it would be like an absolute wish list item. And like if we can keep talking about it, I think let's do that. It's not been a practice that we've taken on because it's not the bare minimum, which is what we're staffed for.
So we can't or shouldn't or have no way of reporting to you in real time when we as public defenders representing these kids are seeing federal rule violations.
If you're seeing a violation, we could provide for you the JJDPA checklist around how to validate, like what the JJDPA says are the validation qualifications for a valid court order. And then if you find that those qualifications aren't being met, then we would want to know about that in real time. But every VCO probably not. Like what the feds say is review records for 1 calendar year's period, and then pull the file on every youth who's been held on a VCO and read the file, understand the circumstances, and invalidate the VCO. And anything that happened where it's not validated, an unvalidated VCO is a violation. Those are the feds' marching orders to us. Now, does that align with what we want in real time and like in practice for young people? Absolutely not. But I mean, like, I'm saddled between like reality, unfortunately, and then like what we want to have happen, or like what we're trying to dream up or to grow into. So, big part of me is like, heck yeah, tell us about that right away. So if we can keep talking about that, I'd appreciate it, because what if we can identify like one additional mechanism to build in that doesn't add like a ton of the other thing is like not all counties or jurisdictions like care to get involved like that, or care to like tip us off or get involved. It's like, why on earth would you be contacted? Like what role do we have with this, or what, we don't want to get involved in this way. But if we could like pilot something that sets a standard and say like, it wouldn't add that much additional complication, but it would eliminate could eliminate a lot of harm.
Yeah. I mean, because part of that would be educating the bench too. But I mean, I don't know, I'm assuming you probably do bench education somehow about why they shouldn't be doing these things, but
A lot of it is in response to like repeated violations that are happening, and then we dispatch like one of the judges that we have on JJAC in partnership with us, and then we go and speak judge with that judge, and he speaks judge with that judge and just says like, here's why you can't continue this practice, here's what some of our other colleagues are doing, here's some alternatives that you might want to consider, but like what you're doing has to be, like, we got to figure something else out.
they have judicial training conferences. Maybe you guys could try to get on those and
Yeah.
like, I mean, they don't like being told what to do, but the reality is a lot of them, I don't think appreciate or understand why they can't legally do these things. But then they don't care because they're like, well, what am I supposed to do? Release this kid to the street? And that's the alternative. So then they end up issuing orders because they don't want to just release the kiddo to the street.
We hear horror stories, especially about girls who are
Yeah.
trafficked. who,
Right.
Like, what's the safer alternative? We'd rather keep them locked up and keep them alive than return them to the person who's trafficking them and so it's like, yeah, but secure detention is not that place.
Well, yeah, therein lies the problem.
Yeah. So I think that's a great idea, and having, perhaps getting Judge Mayer to present, which he's done in the past, presented at the judges conference. But it's just like we find power in like seeing if like a judge can speak judge to other judges. They don't want to hear from old youth worker McGee over here.
Well, thank you so much. I think we have another agenda item with Priya, right? Is that Gina?
Liz.
Liz.
And Gino.
Oh, I'm
Gino's
sorry,
online.
Liz is over here. I didn't see
Thank
you.
you for coming.
Hi, yeah, thank you.
Thank you
We
so
can-
much.
we can
Yeah, it's been really helpful.
Well, and I think we've identified, like, I really appreciate this conversation, the questions and everything that this group represents and what you're about on a consistent basis, and you've never stopped and you've never given up. And appreciate the chances to tell you what it is we do and the limitations, but like the will is there to partner and to figure out if we can come up with something better for young people, because somebody's got to do it. Like, we're all continuing to like identify problems in our separate spaces, but somebody has to step up and like draw plans, like put some blueprints up there, so you can count us in as somebody at the table to help with blueprints and like, and, partner however you're willing to in the future. So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much. I'm gonna attempt to see if I can rip my cord out without being aggravated and getting over this. And I have a couple of follow-ups for this group that's coming by email. I've got a link to, or a invitation to the JJAC meeting tomorrow, and then, which includes our platform. And then I've also, I owe you that report, that statute, the comparison, the federal state comparison report.
Kelly,
So-
I connected you with Don over email today, so you can email it to Don and Don will get it out to this
Yep.
group.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
sounds good.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you all. School out. All right. Oh, thank you. We'll wait for things.
Hi, Liz. See you.
And Gino's online.
Yep, I see him.
Hey, everyone.
Yeah, so our next agenda item is our PRIA policy update.
Yep, and this is just reporting back on some stuff that we were gonna look into.
Sure.
I'm gonna do some stuff, and then Gino's got some stuff, kind of divided, a little divide and conquer here. So specific to the policy, I know when we were discussing this last time, the issue came up specific to the PRIA policy on false allocations and discipline. And I just want grounding us. The original language in our current policy says the offenders who falsely allege yada, 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 will be held accountable through all means available to the department. That's the current language. Our proposed language is if an investigation reveals that the incarcerated person made false allegations, they may be held accountable through disciplinary process and or referral for criminal charges. So it's really gone from, right, so what we did is went back and we did a review of cases where there was a connection between PRIA complaints and discipline to see what of significance rose out of that. So part of our team reviewed all of the PRIA investigations for 2024 And out of those, look specifically at those where there was an unfounded conclusion, which means there was evidence that this was not a PREA report. So the three options are, it can be substantiated, which means there was evidence of a PREA violation. Unsubstantiated, which means we don't have evidence one way or the other. And then unfounded, which is there is evidence that it didn't happen. Okay? So we look specifically at those unfounded PREA reports for 2024. And there were 100, I guess somebody.
Is somebody got their?
Linda,
Linda?
Can you?
Yeah, I'm afraid it's me.
Okay, so I think we might be, I don't know where we're at. So of those,
I think it looks like it could be Linda.
Yeah.
Is that on mute?
oh, let's see. Of the 188 cases that were unfounded in 2024, we then cross-referenced those with the disciplinary records on those individuals. And we were looking for any discipline that occurred at or near the time of the PREA report. And out of it, there were 35 cases. Of those, there's some countdown going on, but okay. So we looked at those 35 cases, and here's what I pulled out as what I thought was significant. So of those 35 cases, we had 9 where the PREA claim, I would say it was made as in response to a disciplinary action, right? So in the majority of them are instances where the disciplinary action was for an incarcerated person engaging in inappropriate sexual acts. So most common, somebody was masturbating in front of staff and when directed to stop, refused to, right? And then so there was disciplinary action about that. And then after that, the individual filed a PREA complaint against the staff.
Can I
Okay?
just clarify, this is just Shakopee, right?
No, this is all facilities, and I'll tell you what goes where. Okay. Yeah, so this is across all facilities,
Okay.
right? So that's that, right? So that was 9 of the 35. Clearly, that was what had occurred. Out of those, there were also 11 of the 35 cases that had an unfounded PREA allegation and discipline, and it all arose out of some sort of search, either a PAT search, an unclothed body search. So I think that's significant, right? So it's about a little over 30% of the cases. And then
And just to jump in quick on that, Liz, that also could include even a room search after a.
You're right,
know,
but I think all of the ones I looked at, all of them are either PAT or unclothed.
Okay.
Yep, I went back through all 35 cases. So then that leaves 15 cases where there was an unfound PREA investigation that didn't involve a search of some kind. And where, so that's about 8% where there was some discipline, right, that was connected in some other way. So what were those? So the discipline was everything from lying and misrepresentation. And there's a case in which I think there was something like, there were multiple unfound claims against a staff from the individual. And after I think it was 9 of them, there was then a disciplinary action for lying and misrepresentation. There was one case in which there were drugs also involved, right? There's a PREA complaint. It didn't look like the drugs, the finding of contraband and drugs did not spur the PREA complaint, but these things came up together, right? So what the linkage is between them, I can't tell you exactly, but those kind of things. So we then looked at which facilities. So recap, 188 cases unfounded, 11 of them, and then 35 where there was also discipline. Of those, 11 of them circled on search incidences of some kind. 9 appear to be in direct response to being called out for discipline. in at least 15 other cases. So we then looked at facilities. All of the facilities except for Togo and Red Wing Adult Facility had pre-investigations that resulted in unfounded findings. Okay, so there was some report made and there was evidence to show it didn't happen. So that ranged from 3 cases at Red Wing Juvenile and up to 40 cases at Oak Park Heights. Okay, so across of that 188. There were 4 facilities where there were no cases where there was an unfounded case and then there was no discipline that resulted. That included Shakopee. We found no case of a linkage between an unfounded prior report and discipline. That also included Red Wing Juvenile. So there were not, we didn't find any cases in those 2. Also,
So sorry, let's just to be clear on, for me, because, so we had unfounded cases at Shakopee, but none of those resulted in any further discipline.
we saw no discipline linked to the report of the unfounded allegation.
Okay, are you saying that none of those cases resulted from someone getting in trouble and like retaliating?
There were not,
Versus they didn't result in discipline for the person?
there was no discipline for the person at all.
And what about the other? Like,
So here's my little chart.
yeah,
Okay, so we went down here. So like in Shakopee, there were 10 PREA allegations that resulted in an unfounded finding, evidence that it did not occur. There were no discipline cases in or around that report.
Any of those 10,
Those 10 individuals did not receive discipline of any kind,
even though it was unfounded.
even though it was
Does that make
unfounded,
sense?
right?
it does, but it sounded like some of the previous cases you were talking about, some of the individuals who had PREA claims those PREA claims were in response to
Right.
some type of.
So those are, so I can tell you, those claims as a response to discipline, there were none of those in Shakopee, right? There was 1 out of St. Cloud, 4 out of Faribault, 7 out of Stillwater, and 11 out of Oak Park Heights. Okay, so those clearly in response to, so I broke it down by facility. I also looked at those that are resulting out of the searches, I know it's a category that this task force has looked at. So I thought it was interesting to look at it. There were none of these, essentially there was no discipline at Shakopee on these cases. But in the other facilities, I did break it down and it really fell across like where the searches were happening, 2 at Moose Lake, 1 at Rush City, 1 at St. Cloud, 1 at Faribault, 2 at Stillwater, 4 at Oak Park Heights. Because part of what I was looking at is do we have a facility where these searches are happening that are getting complicated up with PREA, right? So it looks like across a number of the facilities. I didn't go further than this, but it didn't look like we've got a problem at X facility, very specific. So that's basically the information I looked at. So I do think that we should continue to monitor and look at this stuff. It was interesting to me. There's some things that I think come out of this. We do know that searches, pat searches, unclothed body searches, and clearly searches with uncooperative individuals are problematic, right? We know that. So, looking at one of the things that Gino and I did was we went back and we wanted to see what is the specific training we're giving to correctional officers around this stuff. And we have that material, we're looking through it. We were asked, do we think there's something more specific that we might recommend from the PREA unit? So we're looking at that. I do think it's an interesting and an important thing for us to continue to look at. The other thing.
I'd like to just add, Liz, I think for us, we were, really pleasantly kind of surprised that when we look at that information specifically that we do have, false claims that come out, and I would have thought we would have been disciplining more for that, and we don't. And in some discussions with the associate wardens out there and getting some feedback from them, and a lot of these, kind of stem from some mental health cases where somebody's, making some false allegations, and the understanding is that we're working with that person and not just disciplining them for a false allegation. So it was good to see, and I think it's something though that really brings us, like, this is something we can continue to look at regularly and monitor.
Yeah.
So I do have I
Mhm.
see you, Nikki, and I'll get you right next, okay? Since you looked at the cases kind of qualitatively at the different situations, I'm curious, like, are there any patterns that you see of the unfounded cases that happen at Shakopee? Are there, like Gino mentioned, like, is there a pattern of it being kind of a mental health
Okay,
related?
what I'm gonna say is, what I look deeply at with those where there's the crossover between discipline and unfounded. So that 35 cases, I looked at each one of those, both went through the disciplinary records, and these are two different systems, right? They don't automatically overlap. So I dived deep into 35. None of those 35 was out of Shakopee. So I did, right? So I did not look deeply at the Shakopee
I see.
unfounded cases. Now we could go, you know, we have that information, we could go back and pull it. But, you know, literally, okay, we have no automated way to do this.
Yeah.
So, I, I went through 35. I didn't go through the whole 188.
I'm a
So,
qualitative researcher, so I know
Yeah.
exactly your pain.
yeah, so if there are specific questions you want us to look at, we can certainly do that, but I didn't do it for this purpose.
Okay,
Yeah.
Nikki, go ahead.
Well, I just really appreciate Liz and Gino, you guys doing this dive into the data, and kudos to you and your team, Jeff, at Shakopee, that your team has the knowledge, the expertise, the understanding that there are other issues going on with these women, and that disciplinary action is not the appropriate response. So I just want to acknowledge all of that. And then I want to just ask, you know, I was part of the smaller group that was looking at the PREA policy, and the other place that touches on this that was really disturbing to me was, and I can't remember if this has gotten resolved in the policy or not, but the fact that when someone was brought into facility, that it was part of the intake process was to inform them that if they make false accusations in this area, they're facing disciplinary action. And so I'd like to just follow up on that, because like what we're talking about here is the unfounded. So those false accusations and then folks being disciplined for that. And that's not happening in practice, which is fantastic. But on the flip side of that, for folks who might have substantiated claims, right? We know that an abuser can leverage all kinds of tactics to ensure that someone never reports, right? So on the flip side, the people who wouldn't report something real because the correction officer might be telling them, you know, like, you don't have the evidence, they're not going to believe you, you are going to get in trouble, you will face disciplinary action if you bring something against me. So I'm just wondering if we closed that loop in the policy, did we eliminate that call out that was like, they will be informed that if they falsely accuse someone, they will be punished? Or is that still in there?
Do you know you're gonna take that?
Yeah, I'll take that. I think, and I don't have it right up in front of me, and I'm working off of the one screen, but I think when we changed that language to the, you know, may face the discipline for the false accusation, that part I think is covering it. In the earlier part of IP education, I think is what you're referring to.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, we're doing. I'll have to go in and look at the policy. I don't think there's language in there that talks about the discipline part at that.
Yeah, actually,
but in the actual
Gino?
practice. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I do, and I believe I have the last version.
Okay.
But I think it does actually reference it, because it does list all of the things that must be included. And it does include.
Oh, sure.
One of the pieces of incarcerated person education is what defines a false accusation and consequences for making a false accusation is there. What we can also do is we've now standardized the training across facilities, and we could give you a copy of, and it's based off the National PREA Resource Centers.
Yeah, exactly.
Training.
And basically,
Well, that's sorry, just to Sorry, Gino,
Yep.
I just wanted to clarify that the reason I remember it being in what Liz just pointed out is because I looked at the national standards, and there is nothing in the national standards that says that IPs have to be like, that has to be told to them in that setting, right? So, sorry, go
Right.
ahead, Gino, sorry.
Well, let me just,
Okay.
Gina, maybe you can answer this. What I don't know, and you think I would know this, because we've been looking at training stuff quite a bit, is we are switching to the National Peer Resource Center's training for the intake training, right? We're using their materials. I don't know if that is specifically included in the video.
I think it is. And,
Okay.
and I think it is. And I'll go back and watch it again and I might be wrong on it, but I do think, so what we've taken is the comprehensive video that the National Pre-Resource Center offers for facilities. There's a shortened version out there, but we use the longer version. And in that version, it does talk about reporting, and you have the right to, report confidentially and all these different methods of reporting. And I believe there is a disclosure there that if you are false reporting, you may face, discipline for that. I will go back and double check on that. But that's probably why that's listed in there. And I will say that the other practice that we've really streamlined this year to make sure it's consistent at every facility is that any new intake person that's either coming into Shakopee or St. Cloud, I say that because those are the new intake facilities. They will actually watch this comprehensive video and receive the written transcript of it, as well as brochures and reporting opportunities for numbers and those kind of things that they can call, or addresses that they can write to for those reporting pieces. So we've streamlined that, and what we've done is just used exactly what the standard is as a resource from the National Pre-Resource Center. So we want to make sure that we're covering all those bases on that. So if that language is in there, that would be the reason why. If it isn't in there, then that's something that we can work towards removing that part in the policy.
And then-
Okay, that's really helpful. Would you be willing to circle back to us, Gino, about like if that's included in the video or not? And
Yeah,
I
we can just send that
definitely will. And one of the things I would ask for this group is that because we have this policy hanging out there for quite a long time, where it was actually due back in to be completed back in November, we want to make sure we're getting out the most recent version out to our staff so they'll start following the new policy piece. And if that is there, so what my goal is to get that back to policy and legal by the end of this week after this meeting, to get some of that feedback. So I can look at that, and if I have to make that adjustment, I can probably make that adjustment this week. But the other piece I wanted to make sure this group understands is that this is an annual policy. Will get reviewed every year because it is it's such an important policy. Some are on a little bit not an annual basis, but this one is, and we will continue to use this group as our community stakeholder, so to speak, where we want to reach out and get feedback. So when this gets submitted this week or soon, it's going to get implemented probably by March 1st. And then we're going to be re-reviewing it again in September. So it's going to be like out there for 6 months. So we do have opportunities to, to make changes in a fairly recent or a fairly expedient manner after this one gets posted, if you do see other things. So if that makes sense.
And then I just want to make a comment before you're going over, Nikki, I mean, to what you're saying, I mean, there is the policy. We also know that, right, we can do what we do with the policy and with the training stuff. And we also know that there's a problem with how folks use, intimidation tactics. There are cultural issues within the prisons that are problematic. that are not getting addressed here. So we know that, right? So, yeah, so that's part of. yeah,
Well, and
we're
one of the
still working
pieces
on
that
those.
goes with our PREA, investigations and our processes is we follow a very strict retaliation monitoring process too. So somebody makes an allegation, even if they were a witness that maybe made the allegation of something they observed happening, we are going, even including staff, we put those individuals on a retaliation monitoring. So it's 30, 60, 90 days. We're checking in with those particular people to see if they've been retaliated against for reporting. And then at the conclusion of those 90 days, a person can ask for even further monitoring on that if they have some fears or those things.
Angela, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Can you tell us the year that you said the PREA training video for intake, is that a recent video? Does it change every year? I'm not sure.
It's the most recent one that's posted on the National PREA resource site. So I would assume it's the more recent one that they're providing us. Pardon?
It's on the website then that can be
Yep.
accessed by, okay,
Yep.
thanks.
And again, there's different versions. So the one that we're using, it'll say comprehensive, PREA intake video, I think is what it is. But there is, like I said, there's a shortened version. We're using the longer version in both English, Spanish, depending on, if there's, language barriers there. The other piece I will say with that is the education packets that we hand out. Again, it's a direct transcript of that video. So everything in that video would be in the packet. Every individual gets those at every transfer. So whenever they move from, one facility to another, they're going to get that packet again in the language that they are, most, that they can read it in. It could be, we have it in like 8 or 9 different languages. So it's definitely available for everybody.
So I'm assuming that the training video that's used is used across men's and women's facilities. It's not different. It's not like gender responsive at all. Is that true?
Yeah, yes, that's right. It's used at all facilities. And again, it's the video that we're taking from that national piece. So, without it having it in front of me, I think it does, reference probably both genders, or is at least made to where it's universal for reporting.
There's no universal when it comes to sex.
That's true.
So,
Good point. Good point. Very good point.
Gino, how long is the video?
It's about 15 minutes.
Oh, we should watch it. We
Yeah.
should just, if it's okay, if we're allowed to
No,
access
it's
it.
on the public.
Oh,
And
okay.
we went to using the National PREA Resource Center because one of the things that we discovered is that different facilities had various versions of things they were using. Some of them were sort of interesting and quite outdated, right? And so one of the things that our commitment has been, Gino and mine, is to come in and let's at least get some uniformity. And across facilities so that we make sure, yeah.
But is uniformity what makes sense when we're talking about men's and women's
Well, I
facilities
mean, as
and
a-
PREA?
But one of the things is
Yeah.
that, I think, well, looking at it, I'm not saying that we can't improve from there.
Yeah.
Our
no.
first thing was let's look at, to make sure that, compliance, not just for compliance sake, but compliance is for a reason, right? The standards exist for a reason. So let's make sure we have a way in which we are compliant across all facilities.
So for
and-
compliance.
Well, not just for compliance, but also because the standards matter, because if we're in compliance, hopefully we're getting better services to folks, right?
I'm not gonna speak for these folks, but if there were a video put out by the PREA Compliance Center for Women, we'd be using that as Shakopee.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, if people know of resources out
Yeah.
there, let us know, right? I
just
mean, I
feel
think
like
that's,
would. make
yeah, we are
sense.
not opposed.
Yeah, for sure.
And there is a specific juvenile video that we're using at Red Wing as well. So
Yeah.
that is more, guided towards youth.
Yeah.
So, but to Liz's point, one of the pieces that I would want this group to know is that for me and Liz is, coming into this with just in the last year was really like trying to establish a baseline. I mean, there was a lot of inconsistencies over 10, 15 years of, okay, we're going to do this video. Okay, we're going to do this education packet. And it was really like trying to take this baseline view of like, okay, stop. We all need to meet the compliance. So let's get back to the basics, get what's understood by the National PREA Center. And then now, now that we've got that, and I think now we're in a good spot to where we go, okay, can we expand on this and make is there a gender specific, video or additional piece that we could implement for Shakopee or, so those are things that I think we're getting to that point now where we can start really taking that step forward and now into improving because we've kind of got everybody at that baseline level. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wasn't meaning to be critical. I was just,
Well, you can be critical.
okay, all right, so I will be. No. But, and I do realize that, at this point, it's too late to make changes for anything now, but maybe, I do think it would be interesting to see the video as a group and maybe have get some feedback from people. Maybe could we put that on the next agenda?
If you want us
Knowing that
just to
it's not
send you the
gonna-
link, I
We
mean.
can send Don, have Don send the group the link.
To Don, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe we could put that on the agenda for next month if
Have
we
everyone
don't
watch it
have
on their
anything
own.
else.
Yeah, whatever, yeah.
Or maybe, well, so
I think it'd be nice to watch it here so that it's all fresh in our
Sure.
minds,
discussion.
because it's only 15 minutes,
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm also looking at the time. There's two other pieces of information we want to report back to you on quickly, and I know Gino and I both have a noon
Yeah.
meeting that we're running. So Gino, do you want to just quickly go through your pieces on the juvenile stuff?
Yeah. So first of all, I think the comparison of the 2960 and the PREA standards was an interesting document that came out. So thank you for running the AI version of that back in December on that. So we've been, as my unit has been kind of looking at that and doing the comparison, and what we are looking at our next steps here is we're developing a survey to go out to those. We work with Red Wing on a regular basis. They're actually going to be in the next meeting. So, but those facilities that are the secure residential centers out there that are run by either nonprofits or joint powers or those. So we want to send out a survey on PREA compliance, understandings of PREA, get kind of again, looking at that baseline of how people are they complying or do they need more information? Can we be that resource to provide those facilities that information, that training? We've got some grant dollars that we'd like to spend this year. We've been spending it on our facilities primarily in the last few years. We've been upgrading cameras, those kind of things. Well, this could be an opportunity for us to start doing some outreach with, facilities out there that maybe we can provide some dollars and some resource material that we can be there to be of assistance. The licensing inspection unit, their role obviously is to come in and do the audits and do those reviews. We could be that resource for them at least until any language changes may happen in 2960. That might be something that this group might want to look at if you want to make recommended language changes to 2960, so you have a little bit more enforcement steps with Priya, but that's something that I know is further down the road. So that's one of the pieces that we're developing on, and we're gonna hope to get that survey out sometime March into April probably. So that's something that we're kind of looking at. And I talked about the policy piece. So yeah, with that, I'll leave it out there for a few questions if anybody has any here before we step out.
Don't see anything. Is there more coverage?
Nope, that's
No,
what we
okay.
came, unless you have questions on
Yeah.
something, but we can certainly send the link over for the
Yeah,
video.
That would be great.
And,
Gino already sent the link
oh,
over.
look at that, already
Okay.
there. So, and then we'll also look specifically at the video ourselves and answer a couple of the questions you came up, and, probably just send that to you, Don, so you can
Sounds
put
good.
that summary, may not happen until the end of the week.
So I know that you have plans to review the policy annually. Do you have a date or a month that takes
Well,
place?
November, but okay,
Yeah.
we are still in well, actually, I think it's from 2 years ago,
Yeah.
actually, but Gino came on in November. The policy had been sitting in revision
Yeah.
stage for over a year at that point, right?
So when it gets finished, it would be a year from that, I'm assuming?
No, so next November.
Oh, so it's still November.
Yeah,
Okay.
we still are on the same schedule, which is partly why we want to get, because the published policy is the old policy, which has a number of problematic pieces in it.
Yeah.
So we want to try and get the revised policy into play, saying that, and we can still continue to edit. So it would probably be in September. We would probably start looking at it, and we'd probably flag it back over to you all as one of our stakeholders.
So that was kind of
Yeah.
where I was going with this is like, what month should we block an agenda dedicated to like having conversations with you and looking at?
Well, I think what might be
Every
helpful, September might be wise. The other
Yeah.
things, or if it's like, if you look at if there's some questions that you have, like one of my recommendations is not to touch the false allegation stuff, because I think the more you build into it, the more people will read the policy and say, we should be looking at this. Right now, it's a sentence.
Yeah.
If you make it a whole section, people are gonna be looking at it, right? I mean, like, I don't wanna say not, but are there questions or information that you would want to be able to critically look at the policy based on what we're seeing? That would be helpful. So that, because I feel like this time it's like, we looked at the policy, it raises questions, and now let's pull information, that maybe we could do that in the inverse.
So it feels like we should look at the policy as a task force in August and then meet with you to discuss whatever our thoughts are in.
I think that would be
Yeah.
great.
That would be great, yeah, because it's easier if we can come with some information. Because we may have it, or we may not have looked specifically at the issue the way you're raising it.
So Don, can we just kind of flag those for perennial additions to those monthly?
August.
agenda?
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be great.
Yeah. So I'll just end by saying, obviously we appreciate the feedback on the policy, and, and even looking at the data here, that was driven by this group's questions. Those are good things for us to start looking at. And so if you're thinking of those kind of things that kind of pique your interest, what have you, don't be afraid to ask, and we can dig into the data as much as we can and try to come up with some answers. So appreciate the group's feedback and work.
Thanks to both of you for coming and really having a commitment to making this policy effective and including us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so,
Always, yeah.
yeah, always open to questions or suggestions. We'll get going.
Great.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So we have 1 minute for public comment.
Go for
Does
it.
anybody have 1 minute's worth of open comment?
We do.
Can I just,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the conference subcommittee had the opportunity to meet with Heather this morning. And so We have some things we as a larger task force need to make some decisions around. So if we can put that on the agenda for next month, we would really appreciate that.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's already on there for March.
Okay,
Perfect.
and Nikki, if there's any specific things that you want us to be thinking about prior to, feel free to send those out to us so we can.
Yeah, it's basically we need theme and we need to identify the days of the week and dates in April 2027 so we can move on some other pieces. So those are the two things that need to be front and center. So
Would you mind putting those two sub items, theme and dates, underneath?
Okay.
So
Yep.
we know
Got
how
it.
we see it. Thank you so much, Nikki, for that. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. It's been great meeting again, and we'll see you next month.
bye, you guys.
Bye-bye. Effective. That was an effect. I just feel like we got a lot done in that meeting. Like,
There's a